Hey there. I wanted to come on and talk a little bit more about the throat chakra. I did a post about how our nervous system, the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn nervous system responses, has a lot to do with our throat chakra. It's because of the nervous system activations that either make it so that we feel safe to speak up or cause us to shut down and not speak up. And it's one of those things where the theme of the throat chakra is so much about authenticity, transparency, and truth. And if we are activated, in ways that makes us, shut up our truth or suppress our feelings or our real thoughts or beliefs about something, to act out of integrity because we are just trying to keep the peace, then we ultimately affect our throat chakra in this area. This is a really big theme that I see here. The nervous system activations are kind of like a whole chakra system thing. There's no one chakra that is associated with our nervous system activation. But like the throat chakra is one of the most heaviest impacted ones because it affects us and how we move in the world. Our voice is really the faculty that allows us to have some sort of influence and power over situations. And if we're stuffing our truth, we're going with the flow just to try to get along and not stir the pot. If we're fawning and we're saying yes when we really want to say no, and we're acting out of congruence with ourselves, right? We're being incongruent, we're being inauthentic. Over time, that has like whole system effects and issues. So it's really in the throat chakra that we channel in, and from the spiritual dimension and also from our physical truth, right? Like, what is our body really feeling? What is our nervous system really experiencing in that moment? What are we really needing? What are we really wanting? And all of that. When it's open, we are able to use our voice in a way that helps us be resilient and adaptive to really difficult dynamics and situations. I was doing a practice that I actually teach in my transformational hypnosis program, where we do a timeline of our life. And I do timelines sometimes whenever I come up against something that's hard to move or feels stuck or sticky. And I look back at my life and I look at situations where I may have had the opposite of that experience, or may have had a repetitive, kind of situation that I'm experiencing in the now. And I look at the themes and I look at my timeline ever since, as far as I can remember, right? Whatever that theme is. So that's what I did. I did that. I thought about the different nervous system activation states, the different ways I've used my voice or not used my voice, and the history that I have with that. And what's really interesting when you do a timeline, you can really see how the way you might have been as a child is different as a teenager. The way you were as a teenager is different than, when you become an adult. And then after so many experiences, when you start entering midlife, whatever years that is these days, you begin to look back and realize that you've learned a lot from what worked and didn't work when it came to contorting yourself or allowing the nervous system activation to shut your voice up. Most of the times, it's not the best choice of action, but in some cases, it really is what we need to do to stay safe, physically, mentally, emotionally. And I want to say, a lot of my clients that I work with are really empathic and intuitive, and I seem to attract people who have had crazy childhood abuse situations. So if you come from insane, mental, emotional, physical, sexual, whatever abuse from your childhood, then the throat chakra has definitely been affected. There's deep conditioning there as a survivor of childhood abuse that has programmed your body to move into certain states and of nervous system activation and use your voice or not use your voice in certain situations for survival. And it takes a lot of work to move out of that, to undo that programming. I have found so much growth in the throat chakra over the last few years. And I have witnessed people totally transform. in using their voice and speaking up and coming out and sharing their truth. And there's so many things you can do that don't even really seem related, but they are. And it's interesting because when I started to learn about the ways to open your throat chakra, I was like, oh, I do some of these things just automatically. I've done this my whole life. For instance, singing at the top of your lungs. Whether you do that in the shower, you do that in the car, any space and place where you can just wail. Get into the music, get into the groove, literally using sound that you create in your voice box will activate and cleanse and clear the throat chakra. Now, there are certain mantras, there are certain chantings and things that you can say that will help clear the throat chakra. But really, I find that it's just any kind of noise, just using your voice. Just use your voice. And if it's too embarrassing to do in front of people, do it when you're alone in the car. Do it when you're in the shower. Do it whenever you can. It really does help a lot to just use your voice in whatever way that is. One of the second things that really I felt like really helped was, which is like the whole the whole basis of my business, Sacred Spaces, is going into sacred spaces, development circles, workshops, spiritual-minded communities where we spoke about real deep stuff and processed heavier emotional history and stuff like that. And practicing getting in touch with myself through sharing those things in safe groups released a lot of the suppression that I had done for myself here for a long time. Because I would say almost all the way through my 20s, I didn't really talk about deep emotional stuff. I wasn't really in touch with my emotional stuff. I was just focused on living my life, working my work, doing my job, going to school, getting shit done, and being happy and optimistic. The truth is though, after the birth of my son, when I had another near-death experience, it really woke me up to all of this unresolved stuff that I had in my body, in my psyche, in my soul, that needed to be digested and processed. And that's where I really started my healing journey. And such a big part of my healing journey is the throat chakra. So another thing to pay attention to is like, where in your body do you most get sick or get injuries? That is an indication of a chakra that tends to be more under functioning than the rest of them. Something that you came into this world with, right? Like a disadvantage or whatever. When I look back at my childhood, I was a pretty healthy child, except for in the very early years. Almost everything that I had happen had to do with my throat, my mouth, or my ears. So I was actually born with a cleft palate, which usually means I have a split in my face, but I only had on the inside. You see I have a hole in my uvula? I have a very weird looking mouth. And so it was undetected, and I was breastfeeding and milk was just coming out my nose because when I would suck, I didn't have a roof of my mouth and they didn't know what was going on. It was mostly misdiagnosed for a while, and then when they finally figured out what it was, I had to have surgery there. And then I had really chronic severe ear infections, so much to the point that I'm actually partially deaf in one of my ears. And then in high school, I had a lot of dental issues, and I had a lot of strep throat, and I had all this shit going on in my throat and my mouth. Like, most of my life, most of the health issues I've had have been in the throat, the mouth, the ears. Now I have migraines, which is different, and I also had endometriosis, which is in my sacral chakra, but that wasn't until I started my period. Anyway, so all of that is a sign that I already had energetic misalignments in that area that I had to work through almost all my life. And one thing that was really interesting, which is something that I theorized like in high school, like why I'm not as messed up as I probably should be from the childhood experiences I had, was that I always talked to people about what was really going on. I didn't have the like social programming that most other people have, that you don't talk about like real heavy stuff to just anybody. In my household, there was so much alcohol and drugs that everybody was just saying everything they felt, without any filter. And that's what was modeled to me, that is normal. So what that caused me to do was like I would talk to my neighbors about the dysfunction happening in my house. I would talk to my family members. I would talk to my cousins. I would talk to my friends. And talking about all of that was actually helping me digest my life experiences. So that's the second point I want to say. Like, if you feel all held up in your throat chakra, like you can't speak when you want to speak, you feel frozen, save sacred spaces where you can process and digest the things that maybe you've never given voice to, you've never spoken of. The dark stuff, shadow work, is immensely powerful at releasing the throat chakra. It's heart chakra stuff too. It really is. It kind of like creates an open channel between the heart and the throat so that you can speak more from the heart. Like when you speak, it's actually more in alignment with what you really mean to say, right? The third thing I want to talk about is mindfulness as development for the throat chakra. Mindfulness is good for all of the chakras, but specifically being really mindful about what triggers you. When are you activated? When is your nervous system activated? What are the circumstances and conditions that do that to you the most? When you feel the most frozen or numb, or when you find yourself agreeing to things you really don't want to agree, what are the situations, and inquire why? Where does that come from? This is where getting a help of a healer or a therapist can be really helpful to help you kind of unpack some of this stuff and understand what these schemas and these complexes are really originating from so that you can shift them. Because we are going to operate within that survival paradigm over and over and over again until we bring some consciousness to it. I can say that like therapy was huge for me with emotional processing and also unpacking understanding why I behave certain ways. It's like there's certain situations with difficult people in my life at that time where it was like I would go in all prepped like, oh, if they say this, I'm going to respond this way. Or if they do this to me, I'm going to respond this way. Like, this is what I'm going to go do. And then I would go in that situation and I'd be in the middle of it and I would just be frozen and I wouldn't say anything. And then afterward, I'm like, God, what the heck? Like, I went in prepared with what I was going to say, how I was going to say it, if and when certain situations happened, and I found myself just freezing again. And then really getting into the deep inner shadow work through therapy helped me to unpack like why that happens for me. And it actually was a lot more mental than it was emotional. It was some of the belief systems that I had. It was some of the rationalities that like I had made. And also the body consciousness, survival consciousness paired together was what was doing that to me. And anyway, my hidden motivations and desires of the situation, all of that feeds into why we respond the way we do, why we don't respond when we want to respond, why we act out of integrity, and all of these things. Now, I do want to say, if you are feeling like you're going through an awakening process, like you are being initiated like spontaneously into deep healing experiences, processing things, always having a healer or therapist is so supportive. I really recommend it. It'll make the experience a lot more smoother for you. And also, I just want to say that as you go through this ascension process, it'll become harder and harder for you to live out of your integrity, to be within situations that you used to be able to put up with. As you get older, as you go into this ascension process, you will not be able to do the things that are out of your integrity. You will literally feel it in your body. May manifest as disease and symptoms. I know it manifested as disease and symptoms in my body, and I got to the point in the last few jobs that I had that I could not do the things they were asking me to do, which I knew were illegal, which I knew were out of integrity. I felt it into my core, and I said, I will not do this. And they're like, if you do not do what we're asking you to do, you will be fired. I said, fine, I quit. Like, my integrity became my number one value. And that's kind of what happens when you go through the ascension process. It's like you reveal what your true, deep values are. And if you're in situations that are challenging that or pressuring you to conform or like contort out of your value system, it's really, really hard to do that. It's really hard to fake and pretend and have a persona when you're in the awakening process. So just know that, doing the throat chakra work, singing loudly, going to therapy, processing your shadow stuff is all just to help support you get more connected to be able to use your throat with consciousness and not be taken over by the body consciousness, not be taken over by the past conditioning and programming about what's okay and not okay with using your voice. Especially those of you in the community who are healers, who are really stepping into your power of being a space holder for people, and realizing that in order to really successfully do that, you have to come out of the closet. You have to come out. You have to share with people what you do. You have to be able to explain it and articulate it and own the value of it, so that you can call in clients. And that's really hard for healers, especially when there's, like, that's the other thing I want to talk about, past life experiences or generations and generations of ancestors who have literally died for speaking up, who have died for breaking from mainstream conventional thinking, who have done healing stuff, who were healers, who were shamans, who were psychics, oracles, seers. They have been historically persecuted. And so a lot of us have this energetic blueprint of hiding, of doing it behind the scenes, of being secretive about it, of almost having to divide ourselves into two different people: the mundane, normal person that the rest of the world sees, and then the secret healer, goddess version of you that works behind the scenes doing amazing work. And I could say, if you really want to live in integrity, live in your truth, you're going to have to choose a middle way or go all the way one or the other. And when you do, it's powerful. Your whole being comes into alignment, and you're no longer divided on the topic. You got to heal your visibility wounds first, your witch wounds. And there's a lot there that I've seen in my clients and myself, and how powerful those DNA or cellular memory is to keep us safe and not stand up and stand out, speak out. Anyway, I look forward to coming on and doing the meditation with you guys soon.